We have some time for questions. Any other questions? Okay, we will start with the ones that we have so far. Two interesting questions regarding manufacturing for our panel. And I will, I think, do we only have one mic? So we'll bring this one over there?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the interesting things I was grappling with as well, that it appears that several people in the audience were also thinking about, is the impact of manufacturing. We saw in the slides that Bill showed us that there is that significant decline. So what is the impact of manufacturing on the other sectors? How much of that is attributed to advances in technology? We know a lot of our manufacturing companies are becoming more efficient. They need less people. Is that a factor? The other question was, how is it possible that we could have such a disconnect with Marina's slide, where we have 123 million skilled jobs, and by 2020 we'll only have 50 million skilled workers? So is automation and technology going to help with that? So I'm going to hand this over to the panel to answer that first question.
Well, with manufacturing, I'll kind of cover the decline first. That's a multiple input as to what's going on with that, the headcount decline. One is technology. It certainly has a very strong impact on reducing the number of people needed. The other decline, especially here in western Wisconsin, like I said, I've been doing this a little more than 20 years. What we've seen is no matter what your larger feeling about things like international trade agreements are, one thing's for certain, that lower skilled jobs are certainly moved offshore. So what we see is lower skilled facilities closing. To be honest, that work can be done cheaper in another country. But what the good news, or the silver lining in a certain way, is that what remains in that manufacturing pool is a higher skill, and that's, so it's not, what we see, and I think we'd all agree when we think about it, is not as high a demand for the widget maker anymore. I mean, the man or woman that just pulls the punch press as the things go by all day long, but instead those who work in manufacturing take a much higher skill set. The jobs we have that remain, by and large, take a much higher skill set, and that's one of the reasons for the skill disconnect, because the jobs that remain in manufacturing are of a higher skill level. What was the? Oh. Well, yes, that is the problem. That we're looking at up front here, the other part of the question, where the 123 million high-skilled jobs will be required in America, and only roughly 50 million Americans that will be able to fill them. It's why, or is the question kind of why is that happening? Well, it is partly the demographic forces that we've seen. I mean, all of us here, and I'm going to include myself as in the group, that we are getting older, as I mentioned before, and we didn't have as many children as our parents did, so there's less replacing us than there are exiting. In addition to that, you have kind of something that cuts both ways, that you have jobs becoming more technically advanced at the same time. So at the same time you're losing your work pool, you're increasing the skills you need from that work pool. So those who for instance, don't finish high school, or only finish high school, let's face it, we have to capture them, to be honest, more than ever before. It's been more important than ever before to capture and train and add skills to those people before whether it was right or wrong, we had a certain excess of people that I've got to be careful here, but the fact is, the bottom line is we have to capture them more than ever before. There was a certain room. There was also, another way to put it was there were more lower skilled jobs for them because of trade agreements, because of advances in technology. Those lower skilled jobs aren't what they used to be. There's still some out there, but they're shrinking. So the disconnect is happening because of the people we're still losing through the cracks, if you will, the demographic feature of the age, and the jobs becoming more technical in nature.
Okay, this question I'm going to pass on to Marina to start. What are some ways that smaller companies can maintain good employees that in those occupations for advancement opportunities with a limited budget? So especially for a small business, how are we going to help small businesses retain that talent and still give them growth opportunities?
That's tough because money is everything, you know, when it comes to education. But I think what we really need to look at, and what we preach quite frequently, is that look at what you have in your own plan. Look at the quality. Maybe someone's been doing something, and I think both of our educators touched on this. Maybe they've been doing the same thing for 20 years. Maybe they really want to do something different, but you haven't looked at that. So I think with looking at in your own back door, in your own backyard, you might find an employee who needs a minimal amount of education or a minimum amount of training, that you could actually move into that higher educated spot that you need. Have it be a feel good, and in the future they could be a trainer, etc. And then look at bringing in someone new maybe then for their spot, rather than filling that higher educated spot. Basically, using the same term I said, find the best in everyone and work with the rest. And I think looking at our own employees that we have and seeing where they could fit into a different part of your company is what you need to start with.
Yeah, I would add too, there's a lot of training opportunities that aren't a ton of money. We have a seminar series that we do, so do other colleges. And there's a lot of online providers that aren't terribly high, but I do believe, my background was 15 years in apprenticeship programs. And I thoroughly believe in the on-the-job training model, that if you have someone who can do it and you have someone who might be able to put them together and figure out a way to have one train the other. There are also train the trainer opportunities. Having been a teacher, I can say becoming a teacher isn't always easy. But there are opportunities to teach your people how to teach other people, if that makes sense. So if you have a small company, you only have 4 or 5 people, can one assist or mentor someone else to learn some of the basic skills? It doesn't cost you money, it costs you time. I know time is money. But in the end, I think you'll get further ahead.
Okay, I'm going to start this next question with Patty. Why not focus on teaching the soft skill of critical thinking? What about critical thinking for our new workers coming into the workforce?
Why do I get that tough one? People ask that all the time. They're like, can you teach critical thinking? We work hard to do that. I think we do a lot of things that are project-based approaches, where they have to actually think and do as opposed to just answer questions. It's one of the ways you get them to do it. I'm going to be really honest with you. If you weren't raised in an environment by parents who made you think critically, it's a skill you're going to have to gain later, and it's a tough skill to gain later. And we do try to teach that, again, experience-based opportunities, projects that we do, making people use one modality, education terminology here, in order to accomplish something, makes them think critically. Again, you're dealing sometimes with a population of people who weren't really taught how to do that at a young age. And so it's a tough one to teach. I wish I had the answer. Here, take this critical thinking seminar and it will help you, but it doesn't always work as well.
The only other thing I would add to that, because it is incorporated into many of the courses on our campus. But the other thing I would mention is that I think internships, even part-time employment opportunities that are not necessarily considered career positions for students, the jobs that they're just doing to pay the bills, are also places where they can learn those critical thinking skills in a different environment, in an environment where it does contribute to your bottom line. And so there are opportunities in a number of different areas for that to happen, not just in the classroom.
Okay, we have time for a few more questions. This one is a question for Bill. Is it correct that the top 30 jobs or growth areas will not be paying a family living wage? They mostly appear to be lower level jobs. Can you talk about that?
Well, first of all, I think within that list there is quite a mix. There is the, as I made light of, but it's actually on the list in Wisconsin, bartender, the retail salespeople, and those jobs, unless we start to eliminate those kinds of positions in this world, they'll always be there. Yeah, but there was also a number of teaching professions, registered nurse, the truck driving, and and the other thing you have to look at is while in an environment where I'm going to give a 10-minute presentation, the top 30 is a real good slide to throw up there because, it's the top 30. But when we start to look at, there's over almost 900 occupations in our catalog, and just because some of the hottest 30 are retail sales or stock clerk, doesn't mean the other 870 or so aren't growing as well. And that's another thing I like to emphasize. So in a short presentation like this, I throw up that top 30. So the other thing about the earlier thing about critical thinking, I think of some of those jobs that are the lower pay, let's put it that way. And the gentleman at the end mentioned there's other opportunities to learn critical thinking. Before I've been doing this, like I said, about 22 years. In my past life, I was a restaurant manager. And if you have to, if there's, even though it's not high skilled, if you're a wait staff person or a cook and you're prioritizing orders and making quick decisions about where to serve when and how to route your tables so you get the right order to the right place in the right timing. There's a lot of skills, I think, in those jobs that if you do those well, serve you later in all sorts of other environments.
Okay, here's a question, probably for Marina and Patty. What % of budget should be set aside for continuing training and development for employees in order to provide growth and retention?
Well, that's a tough one. It kind of depends on every individual's budget, of course, but with the statistics that we've shown you today, and again, what we spoke about, knowing that the shortages are out there and that training is basically going to have to be a part of your everyday life, I think we're going to all have to dig deep and find that chunk and have it be a third of your budget, a quarter of your budget, whatever it might be. There has to be money for training, if not just to keep the employees you have and keep them excited about their job, it's to find the new employees that are coming on board.
I think too that the important part is you start somewhere. So if all you've got is say 10%, put 10% aside, figure out what your greatest needs are, and spend it on that. You'll quickly spend it, I guarantee. And then see where you get, and then I think you'll grow it from there. But at least starting somewhere, 10% is a small number in a budget sometimes. In a small business, 10% can be huge. I understand that. But I do think, if you've got to start, make a goal, put it in there, figure out what your highest priorities are, spend it, and then figure out what you ended up with and take it from there.
Okay, and our last question looks like it's for Steve, so I'm going to ask Steve to come up.
All right, who set me up?
This question, how might we maintain the motivation developed at this conference after we leave here and into the future?
I don't know, how do you do that? The big thing is we want to have you continue to network. I apologize to this table, I was stuck in the hallway doing my networking, and I was making too much noise for them, so. The big thing we want you to do is continue the communication with what you gained here today. Some of you get business cards, some of you will pick something up at a booth. The big thing is we all work together, and Terry Whipple's on the audience, he's the economic development guy from Juneau County, and we work together a lot. Sue Noble in Vernon County. I think what's really nice is when you see the regional counties working together. I mean, Terry's helped me out with some of the things I needed for this conference, and Sue as well, and that's what it's all about. It's just working together and finding some things that you might need some help on that somebody else could help, and if you build that energy and you grab what you get today and just continue to work with it, I think you're going to see a lot of good things. And I've already had people that have said, boy, I met 7 people today that I didn't know until today, and 3 of them we're going to meet next week. I think that's probably the best way to look at it from keeping the momentum of what we're doing here today.